Welcome to The Story. I'm Brittany Falkers in for Pat Doris tonight. Ballots will soon be arriving in your mailbox, and this election there are a lot of high-profile races in Oregon and Southwest Washington, but one being watched closely around the country is the battle for Oregon's governor, and that tight race is tonight's big story. So we were fortunate enough to have the top three candidates for governor here in our studio last night for their final debate before Election Day. Republican Christine Drazan, Democrat Tina Kotek, and Independent Betsy Johnson got one last chance to face each other and make their best case to Oregon voters. In just an hour's time, KGW and the Oregonian tackled the issues most important to you. That's homelessness, mental health, addiction services, abortion rights, education, and campaign funding. Here's Christopher Stout, Associate Professor of Political Science at Oregon State University.
The stakes are really high, in part because there's a large number of undecided voters in Oregon. I think in almost any election, people have already decided who they're going to vote for. But in this case, because we have three really qualified candidates, a lot of voters are trying to make their final decision.
The three-party debate, Stout says, offers candidates a chance to persuade more so than a two-party debate.
In this particular election, I think just the dynamics of having three candidates and three choices makes this debate more meaningful than if it's just a Democrat or Republican. Because ultimately, independents are going to always have a favorite, either a Democrat or Republican. And so the debates would matter in the short term and in the long term, they'll revert and go back home to where their party is. But in this case, you have three candidates, and that really throws off the dynamic of what we know about how debates matter. And so I think this debate is probably different than other debates.
So let's get to the issues. The first question of the night focused on a topic really driving the race for governor: homelessness. Candidates were asked if they'd support Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler's plan to ban unsanctioned camping and instead ask the county to set up three massive sanctioned camps, and how they would help people get off the streets.
I think it is important to make it easier for outreach teams and folks who are providing services to connect with people who are camping outside. And I think this will facilitate. But it has to be done right. It has to be done effectively. And honestly, as governor, I'm going to make sure it does happen. Holding the mayor and the city accountable to getting people off the streets, connecting people with services.
I think that has been the hallmark of dealing with the homeless problem, that we can't seem to agree on the methodology. Everybody thinks their way is the correct way, housing first or deal with the underlying problems. I think that it is imperative that we have metrics to measure our success so that we're not just taking people and moving them from one smaller encampment.
You have to know who they are. And right now, when we look at engagement with our homeless populations in Oregon, we know that the response is almost entirely housing first. That the challenges and the problems of the people living on our street, that they're not approaching it like it's a case management challenge. That we're moving people beyond being houseless and unsheltered into supportive housing, into services, and then on to stability and the dignity of work.
Stout says that answer separates Drazan from the tough on crime stance of many Republicans as a means to address homelessness.
I think with Christine Drazan, she set the tone really early on that she was going to go after independent voters. Her response was that we need to show compassion and understand what they're going through. And this kind of harks back to an idea of a compassionate conservative that we saw in the early 2000s with George W. Bush.
KGW asked the candidates if they thought we needed more police officers, and if so, how to fill vacancies. Tina Kotek answered first.
When people call 911, they need to feel safe and have the right response at the right time. And we do need more officers. And one of the things the state can do is increase the number of classes and trainings that are available so local law enforcement can get new hires through that training in a more efficient manner.
The other candidates answered the question in part by first addressing Kotek.
Tina Kotek is the original defund the police candidate. She did not support police even when rioters were attacking a police station. It's stunning to me that she would talk now like she supports law enforcement. I will support law enforcement.
Ms. Johnson.
I will join Ms. Drazen in saying I'm surprised by Tina's answer, because we've got to start by respecting our police. That doesn't mean walking with the rioters or excoriating the police when the riots were happening.
Now, when asked if they supported spending Oregon taxpayer money to help people from outside the state access abortions, Drazen said no.
Abortion is legal in Oregon, and as governor, it will remain so. And people from other states would be able to come into Oregon to receive abortion services. But I do not believe that that's the proper use of taxpayer dollars.
Johnson's answer, also no.
Contributions are up for Planned Parenthood offices throughout the country, and I would not use taxpayer money to pay for out-of-state abortions, but rely on Planned Parenthood's past practice of helping financially.
And Kotek said yes.
This is a moment for leadership and making sure that people have the care they need. And that might mean using Oregon taxpayer money to help those individuals have the care they need. And I support that because that is the world we live in right now.
Some questions came directly from voters on issues like education and climate change. Then it was on to the lightning round, keeping answers to just one sentence.
I think it's not uncommon for candidates to go on and on and on to the point where people lose focus and can't really discern what the message is in a lot of their answers. So the lightning round of having them answer really quickly, I thought was really a great way to get their message across and to get a lot of questions in.
Well, they clashed on a lot of the questions. The topic of Timbers and Thorns owner Merritt Paulson is where they all found common ground.
Should Merritt Paulson sell the Portland Thorns and Timbers? Ms. Drazen.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Ms. Kotek.
Yes.
Polls show Drazen and Kotek neck and neck, but Johnson was adamant about her place in the race when asked if she was just a spoiler candidate.
And she was clear that she still thinks that she has a really good shot at winning this election, and that the race isn't yet over, and that she was in it to win, not to play the spoiler.
Stout says the three-party race also set a tone for attacks during the debate. Kotek, who is the former Speaker of the Oregon House of Representatives, faced frequent attacks during the debate from each of her opponents, both of them former state legislators. Johnson was a state senator before stepping down to explore her bid for governor. Drazen formerly served as House Minority Leader. The two were often in agreement on the issues, criticizing Kotek for her comparatively progressive policies, her response to the 2020 racial justice protests in Portland, and her work on homelessness in the legislature.
I mean, I think one of the things that was surprising, and this is different from, I think, most debates between two-party candidates, is in that case, you have two candidates kind of vying for the same voters. So I think Betsy Johnson wants to siphon off voters from Tina Kotek, and Christine Drazen wants to make Tina Kotek seem as not the best choice. And so it kind of seemed at points that it was kind of a 2-on-1. And so Tina Kotek was receiving a lot more criticism than you would have when there's just two credible candidates running for office.
Meanwhile, Kotek worked during the debate to distinguish herself from Governor Kate Brown from the very beginning, highlighting areas in which she disagreed with the outgoing executive and criticized her leadership.
The very first question was about homelessness. And I think Tina Kotek there kind of criticized Kate Brown. So you would assume that a Democrat would work closely with another Democrat. But because Kate Brown is unpopular and because people are unhappy with the conditions of Oregon and where things are going, kind of demonstrating independence from the incumbent and say that I'll be a change of pace rather than more of the same, was really surprising. That's not a common thing that candidates of the same party would do.
And despite the sparring Wednesday night, there were areas where all of the candidates largely agreed concerning homelessness and the homelessness crisis. They all supported declaring an emergency for homelessness, all criticized the rollout of Measure 110, and all supported increasing access to mental health and addiction recovery services. Their preferred methods and focus, however, differ. Now, in debates, we often want to pinpoint who came out on top, who won the debate, right? Well, Stout says that's a tough question after last night's strong performance from all three candidates.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there was a clear winner, that one candidate did better than the other. No candidate made a fatal gaffe. No candidate said things that could be used in a soundbite against them. I think all candidates did well. And in this case, maybe the winner is, well, actually, I don't know if there's a winner. The status quo is the winner in this case. And maybe Oregon voters, because they got a lot more information. It was a pretty civil, informative debate.
And there's debate over debates, especially in our polarized landscape. Do they have the power to influence voters? Here's what Stout said when I asked him if last night made an impact.
I think there's a lot of voters that could have been swayed. If we're looking at public opinion polls, even nationally, we're seeing that people's attitudes between the summer and now, there's a lot of voters who were going to vote for one party in the summer and now voting for a different party. And I think last night could be effective in changing at maybe 1 or 2 or 3% of the voters. It's not going to be everybody's changing their mind last night. A lot of people are set in their ways. But that 1 or 2, 3% can make a really big difference in the election.
Well, now we want to draw your attention to 2 new polls in this race for governor that show just how tight and variable voters are feeling less than 3 weeks away from Election Day. The first comes from the Hoffman Research Group, an independent polling firm headquartered here in Portland. We do want to mention the group explicitly notes they typically work conservative and nonpartisan candidates, so we'll preface with that tidbit. Here's a look at the results, and this won't be a surprise. This race is a toss-up. Republican Christine Drazen leads with 37%. Democrat Tina Kotek has 35% support, and unaffiliated Betsy Johnson is polling below 20%. It's worth noting that 12% of people polled here are still undecided. Nearly 700 randomly chosen likely voters in Oregon were polled over the phone for this survey earlier this week. And the margin of error is 3.8%, meaning Kotek and Drazen are basically tied at the top. Okay, this next poll yielded some very surprising results based on the polls that we've seen recently, but we think it's worth including because the survey was done online rather than over the phone, and it comes from the online polling company called Civics. So here's what they found. It shows Tina Kotek with an 8-point lead at 47%. Christine Drazen sits at 39%, and Betsy Johnson is in the basement with just 7%. Now, this poll did not have an undecided option, and the numbers would appear to show that many of the potentially undecided voters chose Kotek over Johnson based on other poll results. This poll surveyed just more than 800 likely voters in Oregon online between this past Saturday through Tuesday, and the margin of error here is 4.3%. So with all of these new polls coming seemingly every few days, let's turn back to a resource on 538.com, which takes an average of all the polls, accounting for each poll's quality, recency, sample size, and partisan lean. Here's what that average shows today. Republican Christine Drazen with the slightest of leads at less than 0.5%. In recent days, Betsy Johnson's support has fallen and Kotek's has shot up, potentially indicating that Johnson supporters are jumping ship in favor of Kotek. But again, this is all just an average of polls, and Betsy Johnson said herself last night that she doesn't put much weight in polling.
I believe that, sports odds makers don't win games. Polls don't predict elections. I've seen enough fourth quarter finishes to know that it's not over until it's over, and I'm in this race until the absolute end.
And if you're in Betsy's shoes, why would you rely on polls? Her campaign has been polling below 20% for weeks, and it sure seems like they still have faith that she has a path to victory no matter what the numbers show. And that brings us to another set of numbers in this race: money. It's already the most expensive governor's race in Oregon history, with around $55 million spent thus far. So we wanted to check back in on campaign finances to see if there were any interesting trends or spends in just the past few days. You remember, we did a deep dive on this on Tuesday. So let's start by comparing where the campaigns are right now with cash on hand compared to just 2 days ago. Right now, Democrat Tina Kotek has more money available to spend than the other campaigns combined at over $3.1 million. That's around $400,000 more than just 2 days ago. Betsy Johnson is next with over $1.3 million, and her campaign has been on a spending spree, using more than $700,000 since Tuesday. Christine Drazen's campaign has just over $1 million ready to spend, seeing an increase of about $200,000 over the past 48 hours. So where is that money coming from or going in Betsy Johnson's case? Well, there's an interesting trend lately that's worth highlighting. Here's Tina Kotek's latest campaign activity. We're looking at the contributions along the right side there, and you'll notice many are highlighted in red. That means it's money coming from out-of-state donors. It's not huge sums of money, but it is a similar story for Christine Drazen. If we look at donations from October 18th, which is what we were looking at for Kotek, lines upon lines are highlighted in red, each with a $300 donation. There are so many of those that they actually extend onto a second page. Most are coming from LLCs, but it is pretty striking to see so much money from outside interests pouring into Oregon. And when it comes to Betsy Johnson's campaign, spending more than $700,000 in just 2 days, well, we'd love to tell you where that money went, but her campaign finance records aren't as up to date as the other candidates. Her records only go back to October 12th. They are required to be posted publicly, so eventually we'll know, but we don't know right now. We'll keep an eye on it in the coming days just to bring you those answers. And we'd love to hear your thoughts about money happening in the Oregon governor's race. Much of it's being spent on those relentless ads, but I want to hear your opinion. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave us a voicemail. You can do that at the number at the bottom of your screen, 503-226-5090.
Still to come on The Story. Air quality in Portland is some of the worst in the world today. Health officials warn of the particulate matter in smoke that can damage your lungs and even your organs. Chief Meteorologist Matt Zaffino will join us with the details on just how bad things are and when it's all expected to clear up when The Story returns.
All right, welcome back. We want to take a live look outside tonight where you can see that brutal haze just persisting as it has now for several days. The air quality around town, some of the worst in the world tonight, but good news, there is some relief on the way. Let's send it on over to Matt Zaffino. Yeah, Matt, it has been so brutal this whole week. Allergies, sensitivities. Yeah. If you have any sensitivities, you have basically had to stay inside.
It's making a lot of people, think back to 2 years ago, 2020, when the air quality was actually even a lot worse than it is now. But you mentioned it's some of the worst in the world. So here are the rankings. As of, this was about 3 o'clock this afternoon, Portland was third on the list of major cities. Seattle number 1, Delhi, India number 2, Portland with an air quality index of 180 was number 3. We had worse air than Wuhan and Beijing, China. Now, I just looked at the updated numbers and it's gotten better. Our air quality index has dropped from 180 to 171. And Beijing is now ahead of us, so we've dropped to 4th place. So at least we're going in the right direction, right? And in fact, we already showed you this shot. It's still smoky over Portland, but there's a little more definition to the clouds. But I want to share this scene with you. This is what, 10, 15 miles away from downtown Portland out in Washington County. It's clear out there, folks. The smoke has largely cleared. Even before it got dark, we could see the definition of the greens and the fairways. And there's literally little, if any, smoke out there. And that's just in Washington County. It's coming our way. I just heard from folks up in Klamath saying, hey, the smoke has cleared out up here too. Up at Timberline, the clouds are rolling in and the winds have picked up. This is also good news. This is at 6,000 feet. Sustained 15, gusting to 27. Now, I know we're not feeling that wind down here in the valley, but the fact that we have wind just above the valley will help to mix the smoke out. So we're going in the right direction. The process will continue. And in fact, we look at our reporting stations here. I count basically the 6 air quality stations here in the metro area, okay? A couple hours ago, all 6 of these were in the red. Now, 2 of them are orange and 2 of them are yellow. And the yellow means moderate air quality. So we've seen dramatic improvement across parts of the Portland area. Now, for all of us to clear out, and yes, Salem, I know much of the valley is still seeing really bad air quality in the unhealthy category. For all of us to clear out, those winds need to continue. The only thing about that is at night, we tend to see the winds back off a little bit. So we may stick with some smoke for a while, but we're going in the right direction. We look at our smoke model and it wants to clear us out really by about 9 o'clock. It's got the vast majority of the smoke gone by that time. There may still be some overnight and in the morning in the deeper valleys where the wind just skips over and the smoke drains in there from the surrounding areas and just sits. But we're going to get rid of this. It's happening already, and we're going to continue that trend of clearing the air of the smoke overnight tonight and then during the day tomorrow. The air quality warning has actually been extended. It was supposed to expire 22 minutes ago at 6 o'clock. It's been extended till 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, but the clearing process has begun. That's the good news. Rain will also set in tomorrow. It's really the wind that's going to clear the smoke. The wind often comes with the rain, and fire season will pretty much be ending on Saturdays. We start to get some mountain snow. Here's a time lapse from our sky cam up at Timberline. Look at that stormy sky, Brittany. Finally beginning to look like fall up there. So yes, still smoky in the valley, but it's getting better.
It's the forecast that we really needed to hear, that we've been waiting all week for. Thanks so much, Matt. Still ahead on the story, we've been hammering away about Election Day, fast approaching, but Halloween comes first, now less than 2 weeks away. And how just in time for the holidays, KGW is releasing a new podcast featuring legends and lores with a spooky twist. We're going to give you a sneak preview next. KGW is launching a brand new podcast just in time for Halloween. It's called Wicked West and dives into spooky Northwest folklore and infamous stories of old-time crime. Our Ashley Korslin is the host and producer of the podcast. She interviewed local historians and authors to uncover a variety of stories from our region's dark history. Here's a preview of what to expect this season on Wicked West.
In 1920, Vancouver's mayor went for a stroll across the interstate bridge and vanished into thin air. To this day, there are ghostly sightings of a tall, slender being, the interstate bridge ghost. One of 6 odd stories, strange tales, and mysterious Northwest folklore pulled from the shadows. KGW's Wicked West, coming October 26th. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
So yeah, the trailer for Wicked West is out now, and as you heard, the first episode will launch next Wednesday. We'll have new episodes every Wednesday through the end of November, so be sure to check it out. Stick with us, we'll finish the show right after this. For our Hey Help profile this week, we are talking about the KGW Great Toy Drive, which is coming soon. Last year, with your help, we donated over 30,000 toys to local kids and teens. And we want to help even more have a happy holiday season this year. You can join now. Just go to kgw.com/toy, sign up your organization, and we'll send a collection kit. And then you can help collect the toys for local families. That's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday night. The news at 6:30 starts now.